Fine.
All right.
Okay, so last time we were kind of addressed some topics of moral relativism or existential relativism. My world, your world, right? Remember
Right.
that?
Right.
I was thinking about Rene Descartes. I was thinking about logic, about Newton and Einstein, and all of these things were kind of floating around in my head. So because I was so adamant about declaring the limits of logic, telling people, well, we can't really use logic in these areas because we don't have access to knowledge in these areas. I was thinking also about Rene Descartes, his meditations on first philosophy. So Rene Descartes was a polymath born in like the end of the 1500s, 1590s, and he he invented Cartesian coordinates, which is part of where we know his name from. He also was the one who coined the term imaginary numbers in response to other mathematicians who had come up with this idea in arithmetic of using places that numbers don't make any sense but can be squared back into reality to do feasible work, even though the rational mind can't really understand what that would mean. Well, Rene Descartes kind of went off in solitude and decided he wanted to break down all the things that he could say that he knew. He wanted to imagine that I was being fooled by a tricky little demon, and everything that I knew I didn't know. What could I know? And as he's tearing down all of the foundations of thought, all of the epistemological methods of knowing, he comes to the grand conclusion of his whole work there, which is the cogito ergo sum, the I think therefore I am. He goes, well, I can be made to doubt anything except the fact that I am doubting means that I exist. So because I'm thinking, I can at least know that I exist. I think therefore I am. And I was kind of thinking about this and problems we have in logic and wanting to build on this. It's an idea that a lot of philosophers have toyed with to different, and not, I'm sure I'm unaware of certain philosophers who've probably gone further down this path than I have too. It makes me think about being and nothingness. So I was thinking about the framework of how I approach existence in my reality that I was discussing with you. And I kind of wanted to share a bit of that. So my thinking on it is, for a long time, I told you that I had really lost God and didn't think God existed. And then there's a place that I found mystery again and not really sure what to call it. God is a term people like to use a lot. I like to use the term muse a lot because it happens to me when I'm doing art. That mystery thing. And there's a carefulness about the way I've reapproached allowing that mystery back into my life, because I think people get misguided a lot when they place expectations on it. Things go bad in the world, and people look at God and go, "Where were you?" Well, like I expected you to solve these problems, and I don't think the right way to approach the mysteries of the divine, because we don't understand so much about the nature of it, and you can't really take, just like Rene Descartes rips down all of the foundations, you can't take any of the stories anybody has said as gospel in that sort of way. You can take them as allegories to build your own framework. And so what I've kind of been redoing is a reinvention of logic, a retooling of logic in the same category as imaginary numbers are, but for logical reasoning. So I approach this as though there is no God, and that doesn't change my ethic, because my ethic is based in logical function because of what I've seen about the way the world actually works. What goes around comes around, and if you're producing bad, that bad is eventually going to come back and swing and hit you in the face. If what you produce is good, that good eventually comes around, and it's the reason people are willing to save you, because they see the goodness in you. And so I was thinking about all of these things, and it kind of got me thinking about being and nothingness. Does is there a God? Being and nothingness. What does that mean, right? Because it's not being or nothingness. It's being and nothingness. What if when we look at physics, you you think about Newtonian physics, and Newton had some laws that defined motion that made perfect sense for you could mathematically model all sorts of things until you started looking at things really small or really fast. Then that's when Einstein creates relativity, which kind of goes well. Newtonian mathematics is really good if you're talking about throwing a coffee mug at the wall, but it's not really good if you're talking about looking at how light works across vast differences, or looking at how gravity works, or if you're talking about looking at how tiny little particles interact. It doesn't describe or model any of that. You get these curiosities, these superpositions, these entanglements. You get things, particle wave duality, and I kind of think that there's something to be taken in this, because that is real. If you In the 2011 Nobel Prize in chemistry was won by a man who found these things called quasicrystals. Now, I don't understand quasicrystals enough to really teach about quasicrystals, but I think I got enough of a grasp of it to kind of bring it into my framework as something I understand. Because the thing that made it so hard, he discovered it in the 80s, but it took until like the 2011 for him to receive the Nobel Prize, because the scientific community didn't want to accept the conclusion. Quasicrystals have an order of symmetry. They have a patternicity that exists in a way that shouldn't be possible. It implies the existence of a fourth physical dimension, that like an actual existing fourth physical dimension, not like talking about time as the fourth dimension. No, a fourth physical dimension, which is baffling and very, very strange. And tying all of these little components together in my head in making my own frame model. So I have a frame model that, like, for a long time I operated as though, there is no God. God doesn't exist. The answer to does God exist, I go like, probably not, but I also see so many little things in my life that have been like kicks in the face of God saying, some mystery saying like, yeah, you can ignore me if you're willing to lie to yourself, and eventually you just gotta say like, well, like, I'm not willing to lie to myself, but Jesus, like, what the fuck are you then? And so that's when I come to being and nothingness. That does God exist? No, God doesn't exist. Not in the sense that I can expect God to do anything, or I can rely on God to do anything. We have to make our own world. God's not going to do that for us. But does God exist? Undeniably so, because of the improbability of happenstance in my anecdotal reality is such that I can't pretend that there isn't some mystery there. And it's not for me to teach anybody that it exists. It's like they're anecdotes, it's supposed to be unproven. It's intentionally unproven. That's like, it's the reason the double slit experiments work the way they do, I think, where reality starts acting like it's responding to you trying to discover what it is. It defies your own logic. So I think the answer is a state of superposition. The truth value of does God exists in a superposition. It's a waveform that hasn't collapsed. It's both true and it's false. At the same time, it's the God's existence is being and nothingness. And that's basically the sum of my lesson. I kind of got
all right. So
different threads of it.
I love it. I love it. So I agree with you. I see your point from the perspective that you're bringing it. I totally agree. I have no issues at all with what you're saying, if I'm willing to suspend all the rest of the beliefs or whatever that I have, and I'm very much willing to. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. A couple of things that if you don't mind.
Oh, of course. That was the thing I had to say, and I'm willing to have my brain picked.
Yay. Excuse me, just a couple things. One is I had very much some of the same experiences you talk about where you categorize either God is going to save me from this or he doesn't exist. Either God is a Santa Claus or he's the devil.
Yeah.
Either God would have brought me here, a loving, caring God never would have brought me here to abandon me in this moment
Yeah.
if he exalted me in this moment over here when I also felt the same way. What's going on? And that's when you get to the point where, hold on, this world is what I make it. I can do whatever I want. And overall, if I do good for others, then things will get better. If I think of myself as having a pity party and nobody cares and I don't care about nobody, then I'll go downhill.
Mhm.
It's like the little song my kids used to sing, and it's so true, right? If if I don't read my Bible and I don't say my prayers, I will shrink, shrink, shrink. If I don't read my Bible and I don't say my prayers, I will shrink, shrink, shrink. And they would get all small. And then they say, if I do read my Bible and I do say my prayers, I will grow, grow. And the idea is that if we put ourselves in those habits that are helpful to us, it doesn't have to be reading a Bible, but it does have to have a section where you mentally connect and go, okay, Lord, what am I doing here? As opposed to there obviously can be no God and therefore there's nobody to talk to. And so I just got to deal with this bullshit myself.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah,
what I
I agree.
mean?
And in my model, it tends to be more like I can say my prayer, when I desperately need help, with a hope that it's answered, often not with an expectation that it will be. But when I do find without fail the aid or boon of the muse or the mystery is when I am operating in self-sacrificing service of others, when I'm putting aside something that I would, left to my own devices, I prefer to do something other than this thing that I've chosen to do, that I'm doing because I want to improve the life of somebody else or the mood of somebody else or any of those sorts of things. That is inescapably when it comes. And there's a real fine line in that, because I find that when I do something for someone else for the purpose of wanting to feel that boon, it doesn't come, because my motive isn't actually what the motive should be, is it? It's when I'm actually doing the thing for the right reasons. That's when it appears inescapably every single time. Every single time. Yeah.
So I mean, you're just all you're doing is talking about what all the great masters have said over the years. Just
Yeah,
let
I really am really good at reinventing the wheel, like learning lessons the hard way. And whenever I come to a conclusion, they go, "Oh yeah, that's like this guy." I'm like, "Yeah," because I'm not a reader. I'm a trailblazer.
well, so that I love it. I very much love it. Are you not a reader? It sounds like
Well,
you're
I
not.
do read. I read quite a bit, but it's like reading it's a hobby in my off time rather than a route to discovering truth for me.
Okay,
Like
okay.
I discover truth by living more than I do by studying the words of other people. Sometimes words of other people have been vastly important to modeling things and have shortcutted a lot of the hard lessons I would have otherwise had to have learned. So I don't want to discourage the value of reading, and I do read. It's just I often find myself ignorant of a lot of the canon of what people have said, because reading isn't my numero uno approach about how I go about addressing my life. Like I'm not a fantastic student. I wish I was a better student. A lot of people who do read more consistently than I do have helped direct me onto the things that I'm talking about, that help me to, like, shortcut some of these lessons I was barreling into without guidance. So I do very much appreciate that. Not to
So
give the wrong impression. I don't want to sit here and pretend like I am like I don't have a PhD in philosophy. I have not read the words of every single philosopher that's ever been. I'm sure I'm rehashing a lot of what's been said in just rewording it in a way, or remodeling it for myself.
okay, so one of the interesting things, okay, that I here's what I'm in danger of doing here now, Price. If I'm honest with you, is
Okay.
to go from a student mode to more of a sharing mode with what for me, or what makes me tick.
Well,
Or
that's why I said discussion instead of lesson, because I'm a teacher in as much as I am a student. These dialogues are ones that shouldn't be had with authority. Period. Like, this is a place where there is nobody who has greater authority over anybody else, and so that's why discussion and interlocution are kind of the thing that I find most vital to having any of this done productively.
one of the things that I went down the road of was a denial of God, and then a turnaround, much like you have done. Okay, and what you see as a fruitful thing that
Yeah.
happens when you help others with the proper intentions. And I'll tell you that I went through those same kinds of things, and I feel as if I'm out on the other side, and I'm a totally different person than I was before. I feel peaceful about my life. I'm in a place where I call myself being in heaven. I feel as if there's no this. I feel as if I'm in the place where Jesus talked about as being heaven on earth by changing your mind. I've used those concepts. I sent you 3 books.
Yes, I've cracked into one of them.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about and to look at each one of those in their own way. And so I would love for you to begin to digest those books, and let's digest them together, if you don't mind, because I feel almost as I'm an expert at all 3 of those books. Um they're in their own way, especially the Course in Miracles and the Jesus My Autobiography, that those words are up there as red words for me.
Yeah.
Things are important. And what those books do for me is they take the words of Jesus in the New Testament,
Yeah.
and they allow a framework to be built around it. Um, it allows it allows me to say, okay, well, what did Jesus mean when he said this? And all of a sudden there's a place in one of those books where he answers that, and it's like, that makes sense. Okay, well,
Yeah.
where did that come from? I don't know, but in my world, I rejected parts of what the church was explaining. Not that they were wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, in what they were doing spiritually, they can determine their own spirituality. That's what one of the things that I learned is that Jesus said, your prayers are already answered. Look, people said, how do we pray? And Jesus said, not like the guy on the street, that's proclaiming and stuff. He says, go into a secret place and let your prayers be known. And I'll tell you that in both cases, both the prayers are already answered, but you'll get way more reward from having your real prayers with your real relationship with the Spirit. And that's what Jesus was kind of talking about. And if you take those kinds of things over time and you place them in the proper place, you
Yeah.
can begin to see your life as in order,
Yeah.
as non-fearful. And
That
you
makes
will,
that makes a lot of sense. Like, I've always really liked the figure of Jesus Christ. I've taken the Sermon on the Mount as it's one of my favorite moral treatises, as far as like how to live in a way where you're treating people properly. And I won't profess truth false values about the existence of Jesus Christ. If Jesus did exist, he was a great moral philosopher and somebody I really do look up to, at the least. And the I guess I had a kind of a thought there, but it wasn't formed enough to come out, I guess.
Have you heard of I can't think of his name right now. The guy who wrote My Big Toe, My Theory of Everything. He's a NASA.
Oh, I've heard this. This does ring a bell. This does ring a bell, but I'm not familiar with it enough to pull
No.
it to mind.
Wow. So look, there's so many things that we are so close to connecting on, me and you, okay, with our stuff. All right. We really are really close to connecting on. Um, what would you like to explore or talk more of then? If we were going to spend another 40 minutes together hanging out and talking about things, what would you like to talk about?
I don't know. Maybe we can drop the heavy stuff and just reminisce for a while.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. So reminisce for me. Talk to me about old times, man.
Well, I had written on that Facebook about that time in Korea when I went on the like the friendship tour day. We were sent. Sergeant Shrum and myself were sent on that. Only two people in the unit, and that was a hell of a day. They sent us to like a remake of a feudal village from quiet girl. Cat, will you leave the trash alone? Sorry, the cat knows how to open the trash can, and the dogs cannot stand when it does. um, so it's a remake of a feudal village in South Korea, and that it was really interesting to see how people used to live before intervention of foreign powers. And from there we went to a Buddhist temple, with a big gilded Siddhartha Buddha statue, and that's when I signed all those autographs for the kids. Like, holy cow, there's so many kids. You can ask Shrum about that. But like we signed until our wrists were sore. And then when the kids finally came, we were like, let's get out of here before more kids show up. Like, I can't sign any more autographs. um, and then we went to a World War II history museum that was just fascinating, really high quality, that museum. And then we had a dinner with the Korean Minister of Agriculture, which was, I mean, it's just really, really full day of kind of discovering, because like when I was in Korea, like it wasn't a lot of getting to really explore Korea. It was just doing your job, and maybe getting drunk on the Ville if you're not on Red Cycle, which was had its own fun. I did like the Ville.
So yeah, so it's really cool that you talk about having those experience and those memories from those times. Tell me about what it was like to be a young man and to be off in Korea and to be part of such a team that we were doing real world things there. That wasn't no joke.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was, and like when people ask me questions about it, still like sometimes kind of hedge out of, well, there's certain things that secret security clearance, and I don't know. Like, I can tell you where I was, sort of. you know.
So, so one of the interesting things about that kind of response is how easy that is, right? You don't have to pick one time and tell one story. You don't have to make any remarks one way or another about anything. You don't open yourselves up to a lot of questions. It's an easy way to make yourself an unsung hero without having to sing, you
Yeah.
know. And there's value in that. I get it in a lot of ways. I'm asking you, what is it that you thought about? What was it that affects you? What are you proud of? One of
Well,
the
I mean,
things.
I remember landing in the Seoul airport and seeing just the different sized cans of soda, and like all of the packaging. It was like a weird. alternate reality, the culture shock of the thing. Hey, like I've been through a lot of culture shocks in my life, but that one was a pretty heavy one. It's like a whole like such a near miss, like such a reinvention of every little thing, that there is a Kentucky Fried Chicken and its entire menu is not anything you would find on the menu in an American Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's bizarre. It was so strange, like there are traffic laws that nobody obeys, and somehow they're not crashing into each other all the time. And like I don't know what sort of electrical like codes they have, but the stringing of electrical wires over every intersection looks so haphazard. Like I don't know how anybody could even remotely try to make sense of repairing anything, because it's just a nightmare of spider webs. Like the whole thing was just intensely bizarre to me, but also really beautiful, in just like this is a whole different piece of myself, because they're human like me, they're cousins, we all stem from the same tree, you know these are all reflections of me, but spoken in a different language, and it was just fascinating. Just the smallest of things were fascinating. I remember when I was really young learning about the Japanese language being a pictographic language, developed over, originally there were symbols that like actually like a gate looked like a gate, and it got simplified into a written structure. And I thought the Korean language was like that. And I thought over time, just like looking at it, like my brain would start to make sense of it. Like The Simpsons convinced me that was true. 6 months and I'd be speaking French. Like not the case. And I remember I was with some of the Katusas. I really loved the Katusas. Like they were enlightening people to be around, really impressive people to be around. And I was talking to, I think it was Kim, and I was telling him like I just don't understand how this language works. And he informed me that like it's not a pictographic language, it's a phonetic language. It's a phonetic language that was invented by a South Korean emperor king, because they didn't have a written language. And so all of those little squares and circles, they're modifiers on a sound that you make with your mouth. And so it informs like each letter is like our alphabet, where A goes ah, these are pieces. Like this is a specific sound, this is a phoneme, and then this line tells you how it modifies that phoneme and builds a letter or a word that creates a full sound. And like that was marvelous. Like I had no idea. I would have never figured that out if not for the patience of a person willing to teach me about their culture. And so that was, really broadened my horizons. A lot of those things. You remember Sergeant Lee? Sergeant Lee was fucking brilliant. I was interested in physics, and I was on CQ with him one night, and I was talking to him about I had big physics books, the Stephen Hawking books that I'd read, because I was interested in trying to really make sense of physics, because it was my passion. And I was talking to him about physics, and we had a shared passion, except Sergeant Lee is a much smarter man than I am. And he was telling me about stuff I had no idea even existed. These giant like hydrogen chambers that were built to like basically almost in superfluid state model some high particle interactions. And he was like speaking French to me, and I was like, man, this guy is so smart. I imagine he has made a name for himself in the world of physics over there, because that guy was a shining star of the mind.
It is neat. There are a couple of the Katusas that I've been able to maintain contact with over the years, and I enjoyed the program very, very much. Very, very much. What was the hardest thing about being a soldier for you?
Probably that you ever watch Heartbreak Ridge? The hardest part about being a soldier for me was probably the same things that were the hardest part about Clint Eastwood being a soldier in that movie. A lot of dog and pony show, a lot like I thought it was a place where there wouldn't be any room for, just silly bullshit. And instead it ended up being a place completely riddled with nothing but silly bullshit. And that made it very tedious and very difficult for me because there's so much stuff that just didn't make any sense at all. Like no sense of common sense at all in so many of the things we did. But also, like I had that staunch opinion, and later I've come to see why some of the things that made no sense to me did make sense to me. Like, well, did make sense. And like I was always kind of bitter about like never really finding myself in a leadership position because I thought I'd make a good leader, because like my priorities were right. I was going to look after my Joes, and it wasn't until like really this year or last year that I really had the honest conversation with myself where I realized that like actually I wouldn't have made a good leader because I would have let my soldiers walk all over me because I wouldn't have had the sort of rigid backbone to remind them that I'm in charge and they need to do what I'm telling them to do. Instead, I would have been so set on trying to make sure that they weren't getting jerked around that I would have let them jerk me around, and so that was an important thing to realize in myself that like maybe I wasn't all of the things that I had was so damn sure I was because I wanted to be those things.
I I remember you as one of the ones that would get selected to go on things like those programs where you go, like you were one of my reliable guys. If I needed somebody to do something, right, and they said Price was doing it, I said, all right, Roger,
Yeah.
because there'd be some other names, they'd be like, so and so's doing that. I'd be like, hold on just a second, what? Who's doing that? Oh no, they're not doing that. Who's
Yeah.
supervising that? But you were one of the guys that at every turn you were never in trouble. They never had any issues. I definitely remember there were some. Somebody approached me and said Frank needs to go see some medical something at some point. I don't know nothing about it. I don't remember. But I do remember remember there being a situation from while I knew it was handled and everything. Um, I think that it's neat that we all have situations in life that affect us and stuff, and I'm proud of you for taking the steps needed to have a positive outcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because many of us can hide all kinds of things from ourselves and others and think that everything's hunky dory and stuff, and not get help we need. And many times we never even think we need it. It's
Yeah.
just a
I
weird
didn't for a long time.
it's a weird relapse, right? It's a weird thing. You talk about climbing up. What was that low point for you in the army? Do you remember a day that was a tough day for you in the army?
I had a lot of tough days because I was trying to keep things kind of in wraps. One of the tougher days was when we were out at I forgot the name of the place, but it was the White Sands when we went on the long 9-hour convoy to before we went to Korea. I was on RSOP, so long convoy, and then we had to set into that gravelly soil all of those ground rods and set up the antenna, and then it started raining cats and dogs, and we had a river in the middle of the site. By the time the launchers were trying to pull up, we had to use the Humvee to cross that flash flood so people wouldn't get swept away by the thing because it was torrential. And that night I was on guard. I ended up having like a 36-hour shift that day. I was so tired and I was going through some personal stuff then already. And by the end of that day I was pretty ragged.
I remember that day. I
Yeah.
remember that was a mess. That was a rough training exercise
Oh
for
yes, it
all.
was. That rained. It was sunny. It was hot, and then by the time we were we had Rodriguez and Sergeant Sanchez out there pounding ground rods for the launchers, and Gahagan and I were setting up the OE-254, and that's about the time that the rain started hitting, and it just kept raining and it kept raining, and that's when that little dry riverbed we between the launchers and the big four, that turned into a river. Like, you couldn't, if you tried to walk across it, it would sweep you away. It was outrageous. like
It,
like all of the elements were out to get us.
it is wild to think about because before then, I haven't thought about that time in my life. That was the night that Captain Ruth and I got into a mess. She wanted something done, and I was like, "No, man, we can't do it." And she's like, "No, we have to do it." And I was like, "No, man, we can't do it." She was like, "You don't understand, First Sergeant." Like, she called me on the carpet, and I sent my guys out into the mess.
Yeah.
But that's what we had to do. It's part of it.
Yeah, that was a hard one.
That was a rough night for us all. A rough, long. I mean, because there was legitimate danger in what you're talking about there. I
Yeah,
mean, there was legit
people
stuff.
could have died in that flash
Yeah,
flood.
yeah. That was wild, and it did. I forgot about it. It came at the end. So that was one of our. We had to prove that we could move and communicate
Yeah.
and go and come under, go a significant distance and tested our vehicles and things.
Yeah, the ORE, I think, is what we were doing.
Yeah, it's a time in the patriot community that we were proving that we had a capability to do, what our doctrine said we could do.
Yeah.
And it was tough, dude. It was tough. It's hard to drive a Hemet and have somebody talk on the radio, and then you lose contact because one guy's too slow and I can't
Yeah.
see the dust. I don't know. Did they take a right? Is that or that
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
ahead? It's crazy out there sometimes.
It was absolutely ridiculous. That was one of the hardest training exercises. And then having the weather play foul with us like it did. It really did not make that. It really did not make that any easier.
Who were your best buddies in the units?
Oh, I liked a lot of people in the unit. Gahagan was my roommate, and me and him got along pretty well. Turner was a roommate of mine for a while, and I got along with him pretty well. There was Sanchez, I always really liked. Rodriguez, I really liked. Castillo, and there was a lot of balance I always really respected. Shrum, Avery, Green. And then there's other people with more complicated relationships too. But I really was fond of most of the people we worked with. It was a good crew.
Yeah, it's really wild to look back on and just hear those names. Look, I've got an old green book right from my time as back then, and looking at the names and the things we had going on, and looking here, I got Norris and Ramirez and Samaniego and
Oh
just
man, a
just
lot
all
of names,
names and stuff
names
that
I haven't heard in a long time.
yeah, right. It's really wild, right? I was looking through it earlier to see if I could find your name, um, and I wasn't able to find it. I think this was right after that time or something. I got Crabtree, Parsons, Crowley, Lucero, Oski, Hudson, Johnson, Crawford. Look at these names, man.
Yeah, I know all those names.
Look at these names. It's so wild. It's so wild.
The funny thing is that rainstorm that happened on that ORE wasn't the worst I ever saw. Monsoon season in South Korea. We were on one exercise near the hill we ran up on Carroll.
Yeah.
and we were doing just a little RSOP exercise out there, and it was in monsoon season, and it was kind of nighttime, and I don't remember what we were doing. I was in the Humvee, but had some people doing like the mine sweeping exercise or something out there, and the sky opened up, and like it wasn't raindrops, it was just sheets. It was sheets of water just pouring out of the sky. It was the worst rain I've ever seen in my life. Like the air was more water than air. It was horrible. It was like being under a faucet. That rained so hard. I didn't know it could rain like that.
The monsoon season's crazy, dude. It is really wild. It is really wild. Is there one concept from the Army that continues to stay with you that is a positive aspect of your life?
Oh yeah, yeah. The Army values are something I always held very deeply. Is just a good way to simplify simple ethics. But selfless service, I think, is probably the one that's rang truest and hardest to me. Although integrity is something I've always really, really tried to hold very deep and true. It's been important to me to keep myself responsible to myself. I think people go awry when they start letting themselves lie to themselves. When they start just kind of letting themselves fudge their own history in their own mind, that's when you let a lot of really bad character flaws creep in without you noticing them. And so that integrity has been vital to me staying on the right path that I wanted to be, to because I in some ways I Aristotle had this work called Nicomachean Ethics. It's a virtue ethics. It's about how you build your character in order to be a good moral actor. And I've used the Army values as virtues towards building my character in a model that mirrors that. Although I don't follow a single, like I'm not purely a consequentialist, I'm not purely a deontologist, and I'm not purely a virtue ethicist. I kind of have pieces of all three that inform me as a moral actor, because real world scenarios are just so vastly more complicated than any scenario you can model in a book that you could communicate with someone, that I just don't think that a true moral method can be simplified in a communicable way. I think we can communicate essences, and you can make implications, and people can make inferences, and you can do your best to communicate that model to people, as I'm doing with you right now. And I think that interpersonal exchange is much more valuable than trying to put it onto words. As we see in even the legal system, where the spirit of the law often falls victim to the letter of the law. And I think that happens also when it comes to things like moral codes or ethical principles. So I think that's where the existential relativism comes into play, where like I have to model myself the way I can, and be a role model of my own principle of ethic. And if people want to take and model off of me, that I'm willing to share that, but also with the caveats of like, you need to find this for yourself too. These things that work for me, I think will work for you. But if you think that only my system will work for you, you're wrong. You need to approach reality in a way that makes sense to you, because I'm blinded to so much of what other people go through, and I have my way. I'm a piece of a puzzle, and a puzzle makes a big picture, and none of the pieces look exactly alike. So the way I operate in this world is to fill the place in this world that I'm supposed to be in, and other people have different roles in this world to fill that don't look exactly like mine. And so you can't universalize that anyway, because it doesn't apply to everybody the same way.
So I love it. So can I share with you some things about the books that I've sent you? Do you have those here?
Absolutely.
Why don't
Absolutely.
you, why don't you go grab those real quick?
Okay. my nightstand reading pile. My little
Yeah.
brother got me this book. Says it's really good. Piranesi. Haven't gotten
Okay.
into it yet.
All right. Cool.
But these are the three you got me. I've got A Course in Miracles. This is the one I've cracked open. This is the one I cracked open.
Okay.
I've only read the pre-word so far.
Okay.
And I've got The Disappearance of the Universe and Jesus, My Autobiography.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. So the Course in Miracles, like this is mine, and
wow.
and I look at this almost like my Bible. Like it goes along with my Bible. I refer to it daily, and it's got a workbook for students. It's got a manual for teachers. It's got a clarification of terms. And what I found for me is that it gave me something to focus on that was true. That when I read the words in there, I was like, oh shit, it's true. Everything that he's writing about, it's true. And each one of if you go to any chapter in there, each one is a standalone essay, is what it is. It's just a bunch of essays, and it answers questions, and it talks about concepts. And so, if you're interested in exploring more, I can walk you through a few things, and I've actually prepared something if you're interested.
Yeah, sure.
So go into the workbook for students.
Okay.
And it's in the middle to the back section, page number 400.
Okay. What is forgiveness?
Yeah, I see that. Okay. So I just want you to and we're not going to do it at this time.
Okay.
But one of the things you might consider,
put my bookmark in right there,
is reading the first paragraph here.
Okay.
Like it says, forgiveness, recognize what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. And you can keep going, okay? And then keep flipping. Okay, we're gonna for this, I'm gonna go now to 407.
407.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is salvation? Okay.
I'm going to split my bookmark.
No, we're keeping going. Now hold on. We got more, okay? We're gonna keep going. I'm just giving you an overview, okay? And then what is the world? All right. Think about this. This book is telling you what the world is. And I'll tell you, Joseph, your interpretation of what the world is and this interpretation are going to be very spot on. They're going to be very close. Okay.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this. I'll probably, I think once we're done with this conversation, I'm going to crack into it.
Yeah. Okay. And look at number 4. What is sin on page 419? Okay. You with me so far?
Yep.
Okay, again, you can just read the first paragraph there, okay? And then you can keep going. And you can keep going. And we're going to keep moving. And then 425, what is the body? All right.
Now, this is interesting. This really does hash on to much of the things I've been talking about already.
Yeah, let's look at number 6. What is the Christ? And I'm going to just keep flipping through this whole thing, okay? And we got like 20 of them, okay? So just check it out. What is the Christ? Keep moving. What is the Holy Spirit? What is the real world? What is the second coming? What is the last judgment? What is creation? What is the ego? What is a miracle? What am I? Okay, and that's kind of what I wanted to run you through is the thought that if a book could be a book that might have a chance at helping to answer your legitimate questions,
Yeah.
that I would think that this is the one that worked for me.
Well,
And maybe
I
more
will read
people.
through this. I'll start with this section. This is where I'll start today, and it's really not that long. I probably can get through it today.
So let me just tell you what this is meant to be, okay? Okay. What this is meant to be is a daily, one day at a time lesson. Like on day 221, on lesson 221, you do a very short lesson that day. Okay. So
Oh, okay.
what I'm giving you is a bunch. I'm feeding you a bunch so that you can nibble a little or you can do whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay. I
Yeah.
want I want to show you something else in this book. Okay. I want to show you something. Keep going to the back. Keep going towards the back, and it's called the Manual for Teachers. Okay,
Okay.
it's not far back from where you're at.
Yeah,
Okay,
I've got it here.
all right. So the Manual for Teachers. So go look at the table of contents.
Yeah.
Okay, look at that. Read those. Read those to yourselves.
Okay. My eyes are getting. I have to wear
Right,
glasses.
and it's very very small writing here, but I don't want to read them out loud to you, but a couple things is how is judgment relinquished? How is peace possible in this world? What's the real meaning of sacrifice? How will the world end? How is correction made? What is justice? Is reincarnation so? Okay, and then I want you to turn the page, go to the next page. Okay, are psychic powers desirable? Can God be reached directly? What is resurrection? What is death? And then look at the clarification of terms.
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to be familiar with that stuff. Just know that it's there. It's
Okay.
little essays, it's stuff that you could read. And what I found for me is that all of this explained exactly all the philosophical things that had me questioning about all of the philosophers that I had read, all of the things that I learned in Christian, or for you, a Mormon church, which is not much different. Okay, it's not that much different.
No, I find most religions have at core many of the same messages, many of the same lessons, and the framework is just tends to be mildly different.
And so if you read Jesus, My Autobiography, it tells a story of a young man, much like you, who was a searcher, who began to test the theories that he was learning and began to create miracles around him. And that's what you're explaining to me that you're doing. You are explaining to me that you're seeing all of the synchronicities. You're beginning to look for them. And that by putting yourselves in certain situations, you're like, wow, I didn't have a clue I was supposed to meet that person. I didn't have a clue. You never know how it does. But again, it's term after term. I've heard many people say, I just make it do what it do. And
Yeah.
that's what they're talking about. That's what they're talking about. So A Course in Miracles for me was a great, great book.
Yeah,
That helped me.
I can see it's pretty. Your
Yeah,
eyes are pouring that book out.
I have it outlined and underlined and torn through and marked up. Okay, so go now. Let's go to Jesus, My Autobiography, and open that up for me.
Okay.
So if we were going to turn around in geometry, what would we do?
Like you turn 180
There
degrees.
we go. So open up that book and go to page 180.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's about halfway down and it starts. And there's just a few little
Must
paragraphs.
re-educate yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, that's what Jesus's messages is to you and I, is that we have to begin to take charge of our own life and realize exactly the things that you said. when you're doing the right things and you're helping others, when you're lifting up your fellow man, that's when you'll begin to see the miracles. That's when you'll begin to feel happy. That's when you'll be fulfilled and you'll find your meaning in your life. And that's what it's all about, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to this because it's, you know, maybe not the exact language I use, not my exact model of framework, but it's one that I have a lot of personal relation to. So that's nice. And also that it's beating the same drum that I've kind of found my rhythm in.
Yes, yes. Okay. And now let's look at the final book, The Disappearance of the Universe. Okay, this book is one of the most fun books I've ever read. I love it. It's like a novel. Okay. It talks about freaking ghosts and all kinds of crazy shit. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I've got a lot of crazy shit in my life. I told you I
yeah.
had a UFO and stuff. Like, oh my goodness.
So look, that is such a great book. And it gives you an opportunity to open up yourself to the thought of a reawakening, a reimagining of yourself. Okay. And and another thing that I will share with you is that the thing that drove me to my reawakening was A Course in Miracles and my
Oh,
practicing of.
I did start reading this one. This is the one with the two strange mentors.
Yes, 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 yes. You will love that book. You will absolutely love that book. Um, so I don't. Also, there's all kinds of. If you go and start searching YouTube about any of these things, you'll find all kinds of information, especially about A Course in Miracles.
Yeah. Cat,
Um,
quiet, man.
yeah, it's out there. It's out there. Um, but that's something that I would share with you that worked for me. Again, you have to fit it into your framework, okay? Whatever your
Yeah.
framework is. But the way you describe your framework and mine is so close, dude. It is so close. It will not be hard to kind of understand the thought because we all realize over time that drunken debauchery only gets you so far,
Yeah.
and that pleasure just for pleasure, there's no fruit from it. There takes hard work
Yeah,
to get
it's
fruit.
just burning rubber at the start line.
Right, right. And so it that takes some age, right? When we got all that testosterone and disdain and competition and rejection and all these little things that are going around in our young man, when I was in my 20s, dude, I didn't know which way was up. The only reason I had any clarity in life is that I had a wife that I knew would beat the living shit out of me in my sleep if I didn't do right, right?
Yeah, I've got Aisha. She definitely has she has no problem being a boss if she needs to.
Well,
She's
and,
good at
and
it too. She's a good leader.
yeah, and so lucky for me, I had a partner that knew how to keep me in the rails when I needed to be kept in the rails,
Yeah.
and that was valuable. At a certain age, I think some of that testosterone is faced with more stumped toes and broken noses and
Yeah.
and mistakes, and so it tends to temper. You don't poke out your chest and you're not ready to fight everybody, so quickly anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but I love so anyway, those books. If you read those books,
I very much look forward to getting into these.
yeah, yeah.
I'd like to be able to discuss some of these. This course on miracles is the one I'm going to crack into. The workbook for students is where I'm going to start.
Yeah, yeah. So if you start familiarizing yourself with those terms, then what you do by doing that is you put yourself in the same framework as the other lessons in the book, so that when the book says forgiveness, you know exactly what we're talking about. Like
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Like you say, like at one point you decided that there was no God, right? And then you decided that there was a God. Uh, the issue there is not anything other than where you placed all of that in your mind, the effects of the world were still the same.
Pat, leave the trash can alone.
The effects were if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, then it didn't get done. If you didn't maintain your arms, your equipment, and yourself, then you weren't ready for whatever came up. If you were distracted looking off into meth world, or I don't know what kind of issues that anybody could get a part of, but if you're not actively looking for peace, you're not going to find it. If you're looking, it's easy to slip into the ditch, right? It's hard to stay on the road. You got to pay attention, As we think about doing another installment of this, what might that look like the next time?
I'm really not, I have not tried to build a formal foundation in that sense. I've been kind of broaching life with more of an organic acceptance rather than a attempt to wrestle things into frame. So I don't know. I really don't. But I understand that it would be ideal to have kind of a more systematic approach. So I guess maybe I'll think about that and get back to you before the next one about how I think might be best to make a format.
Okay. All right. So sounds great. I love it. And if you want to make it about some of the stuff that we've talked about here, like some kind of shared thing that we have going on, I would love to do that. If you want to make it another lesson about whatever it is, but I would like to make it a thing. I'd like to do it.
No, yeah, actually, I kind of think that discussing in the language that you have established here, like that seems like pretty productive because, like I was saying before, it's through interpersonal interaction that really these things get ferreted out rather than trying to make a one size fits all formula. So I think for me and what I want to do, broaching you in the language that you have established that makes the most sense to you is probably the best way for me to communicate about these things to you. So I think that's probably the way to go.
I love it. Well, if you want to get in tune with kind of my worldview,
Yeah, which I do. And
those three
you give
books,
me all the tools to do so.
yeah, those three books, and of course the Bible is how I frame everything. You have one of the things that I believe about the Bible is that it was put together by a group of people that had their own interests, they had their own reasonings, they had their own things, and I firmly believe that there were concepts that Jesus was talking about that were subtly turned and twisted and put in the Bible such that if you read them the way that Jesus talks about here, you'll go, oh, no shit.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? Just little simple things, just little simple things that they twist. And next thing you know, you're like, wow, by saying it that way, like the way they use Son of Man versus Son of God, right? The way they play on the humanity versus divinity of God, how Christ, the personhood, someone, if you read A Course in Miracles and you start, one of the ones I love is a clarification of terms, Jesus versus Christ. I would encourage you to read that. It's like, pow, it's like, I get it, right? Talks about our name being legion, right? Each one of us. You're like how you describe, like you're simply another iteration of somebody else. We're all a continuation of the singularity in some kind of way, right? We're all part of the one, this shared general knowledge.
Yeah,
It's like,
I actually have a framework model that I've shared with a few people before about what existence itself might be. That's kind of linked to Maimonides' idea about like God creating the universe. Like God would never actually have to make the physical universe because for God to make the universe, God would first have to conceptualize the universe. And that conceptualization would be so complete and perfect that it would be every bit as real as a real manifestation. So essentially, we are a thought of God, you know? And
exactly. That's what this says.
yeah,
we are God allowing us to have our own individual tiny mad insane thought.
yeah.
God is so amazing that he allows us individually to have a mad insane thought and then go explore it. Kind of that's what I think is happening.
Yeah, I have conceptualizations that mirror this. I couldn't. I don't think putting into language really it will ever communicate it as well as I would like it to. But I think we're very much on the same track of thought there.
All right. Well, I'm gonna close this out,
Yeah,
and
it's been productive. I really enjoyed this.
I love it. Okay, so hang with me.
Okay.